A warm welcome to you. This is SA Today on SABC News. I'm Flo Ledwaba. Let's take this conversation further then. We are now joined via Zoom by Melusi Ncala, who is a senior researcher at Corruption Watch. We'll be talking to him about the impact of corruption in providing effective policing within communities. A very good afternoon to you, sir. Thanks so very much for joining us on SABC News.
Good afternoon, Flo, and good afternoon to your viewers, and thank you for having us today.
You're most welcome. I'm sure you've been listening to the police minister today addressing residents there in Krugersdorp and all that's really been happening throughout the week in Krugersdorp. Let's talk about what these sort of imbizos help with. I mean, we see the police ministry today holding this imbizo in Krugersdorp, but how do these help with anything? You know, he's been touching on a lot of issues, but one wonders at the end of the day, how do these help, and are they important, these sort of imbizos that the police minister likes to hold?
Unfortunately, Flo, I did not hear the minister's talk. I only heard the latter parts that were screened on television now. But, you know, there's one phrase that stood out for me in what he was talking about, and that's to say that most of the police are actually doing good jobs, maybe a few rotten apples, to use that awful expression. And perhaps it is so, but we also need to bear in mind that there are systemic issues that are found within policing in South Africa, and hence we have such big problems. And yes, there have been attempts to address these over the decades, but in terms of implementation, we're falling short.
Well, let's talk then, Melusi, about effective policing when it seems really that lawlessness has become rife and actually quite a norm in the country. What's been your observation when you look at crime in the country versus what could be seen as inadequate or ineffective policing in the country? We are essentially drowning.
Well, yeah, I mean, when we look at policing issues, we purely and mainly rather look at it from an anti-corruption stance, to see what kind of issues are plaguing the institution and so forth. And to this effect, actually, we decided to make a podcast that would be as a guide and assist ordinary people to navigate the space so that they can actually understand how it works. And it's got people from the police as well as social justice organizations speaking on how police services work and what people can expect and so on and so forth, because that's also important. But from a Corruption Watch perspective, what we highlight as well in this podcast is that in a 10-year period from 2012 until the end of 2021, is that we have seen at least over 3,700 reports of corruption, and that counts for about 10% or 11% of corruption reports that we have received in the same period. And that's quite significant because it means that police as a category is leading in most of the public sector or private sector issues that we have received in that period. And from these, 38% are about abuse of power. And this includes issues of violence, whistleblower victimization, etc., etc. 30% are about bribery and extortion, and 20% are about dereliction of duty.
So I actually want to dig deeper into this that you mentioned, which is the issue of corruption, and I want to specifically talk on your second point that you raised there, and that is that of bribery. We know that bribery, unfortunately, happens on the regular, and is actually something that people even joke about. That I gave this policeman X amount of money so that I could get away with something. And it starts as a little thing, but then it also impacts the bigger crimes. I mean, you'll hear of some instances where police are in cahoots with criminal syndicates. So in terms of corruption, I'd like you to actually go deeper into that and how it affects policing, how that level of corruption affects policing. As you mentioned, the fact that there are good police, but they might be overshadowed by those that are actually the bad cops. I mean, what are you finding as you look at this? I don't think it's few police who are involved in this.
Yeah, no, sure, definitely. I mean, there's also another point that we accentuate in the podcast, that when you look at the main causes or what's happening within these various forms of corruption, as you've mentioned, bribery. We have whistleblowers who have come to Corruption Watch over the years, highlighting that the police are in collaboration with drug dealers, or at least shebeen owners that are operating illegally. And what happens is that community members will go to a police station, complain and say, I've seen this, I've got this kind of evidence, and so on and so forth. And the police will either not take their case seriously, or they go and give the very same suspects or people that are accused of criminal activity the information to say that so-and-so has come to us and complained about you. And you can just imagine what devastating consequences that has for ordinary people. So those are the more serious cases. And then one of the other serious cases that we have are issues of extortion, where women who go to police stations seeking assistance, especially in relation to cases of gender-based violence, the police will then solicit sexual favors from them to say, if you want me to do anything from this case, then you need to sleep with me. So those are the other atrocious kind of issues that are coming through. But then on a lighter level, perhaps we also need to question ourselves, our morality as a society, is that how do we interact with the police, especially when we come across them at roadblocks? Some of us will offer them bribes of 50 Rand, 100 Rand to say that, hey, I know that I'm under the influence, so can you please let me go?
I mean, when we're, I'd like to still continue on the issue of corruption. I mean, how deep does this issue go? I mean, when we're talking about, when I'm talking about the depth of it, talking about, the role players, who's involved, how far it goes. Are we going to a point where we're even saying it can get to the point where government officials, are involved? Because I don't think that it will be a case of, just criminals and police. Does it get to a point where it actually goes even further and deeper than that, what we see on the surface?
I mean, the whistleblower that whose story we tell in the podcast mentions that he went as far as complaining to the Ministry of Police, spoke to the minister, spoke to the National Commissioner, so all the political appointees within the system, but they did nothing about his account, and it became quite a big case as far as he's concerned. But so to have these kind of cases, and that's where the dereliction of duty reports of corruption come in, where people will say that, okay, I did go to this particular police station, I lodged a complaint, nothing was done, I was told that nothing will be done, then I took it further, looking for senior officers or looking for the political appointees, but nothing was done. So under those circumstances, you can't help but wonder why then the political appointees are not doing anything. Is it because they're involved, or because they have other interests and pushing their own agendas on the side?
All right, sir. Thanks so very much for giving us your time. We certainly do appreciate your input on our topic today. Thanks, sir.
Thank you.
All right, that is Melusi Ncala there. He is a senior researcher at Corruption Watch, and of course we're talking to him about the impact of corruption on providing effective policing within communities, and that's certainly on the back of the police minister,